Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, this March 4th, 2025 at 2:45 p.m. Central Standard Time. Just a little more standard time coming, then we move to daylight time. Truly an abomination. I would like to stay on standard time. I am in favor of staying on standard time, but if we have to make daylight time permanent, so be it, so long as we just don't have to have this ridiculous time change every year. I don't believe it was ever intended to help farmers. I think it was intended to discombobulate the cattle, which it does. I am doing Erik Carlson all over the place today. I may get through 3 pieces. I may get through 4. For those of you who don't know, I do a behind-the-scenes live stream of this episode at my Substack, readingepicthreads.substack.com. You can interact with me live on Substack, suggest pieces, tell me what I should do for this episode of Reading Epic Threads. You can do that at readingepicthreads.substack.com. Please heart this on Twitter and heart it on Substack, heart it on, or thumbs up it on Rumble or wherever else you may find it. And don't forget to support what we do. You need to go to tulipblooms.shop. That's tulipblooms.shop. Get the amazing castor blend. I've got my lavender body butter. Get the amazing castor blend. It's amazing, guys. It takes the wrinkles out. I'm not even kidding. Castor oil is the most penetrating penetrating vector for moisture for the skin that you can imagine. And we've mixed it with sea buckthorn fruit oil, which contains the incredibly rare in nature omega-7 fatty acid, also known as palmitoleic acid. It's in sea buckthorn fruit oil in the highest proportion of any oil in all of nature. It almost detoxifies in the same way that ascorbic acid, also known as vitamin C, does. It has vitamin C-like properties and vitamin C-like esters in it as well, not to mention argan, amaranth, apricot kernel, tea tree, rosemary, patchouli in the core essential blend. If you don't like patchouli, we of course have the rose geranium version. It's all over the place on the website, tulipblooms.shop. Get your castor blend there. Also, don't forget to get your rainfall. This is rose gold infused. We make it right here at the Tulip Blooms World Headquarters. It is a combination of a soothing all-natural aloe base and food-grade plant oils. And when I say a lot of plant oils, I mean a lot of plant oils. We got jojoba oil, tiny bit of castor oil, amaranth, argan, apricot kernel, evening primrose, rose hemp seed oil, whatever essential oil goes in there. Of course, some vitamin E oil, and I'm missing a couple of them. You'll see it on the bottle. We put the ingredients right on there. Every single one of them, completely organic oils, guys. They're farmed in ways that do not put any toxins in them whatsoever. That is extremely difficult to come by in today's pharmaceutical-driven world. With that, don't forget to use promo code Shapiro for 10% off. Every time you use promo code Shapiro, an angel gets its wings. Let's do our first piece. From badlands.substack.com, Death to DEI, the real reason woke policies exist, by Erik Carlson. It is important to understand that many of the people who create, promote, and fund movements and policies like DEI, Black Lives Matter, climate change, LGBTQ+ agendas may not have the same goals, beliefs, or values as the people who simply adhere to and support these types of movements and policies at the level of the foot soldier. Many who follow and support these movements do so in good faith and believe that these movements and policies were created to do good, to provide a level playing field for people they believe are marginalized or victimized. Many people believe they're making the world a better place through adherence to these policies. One Friday afternoon each month, to this day, I drive by a group of older white people at a busy intersection on my way home from work. In a very diverse yet non-Black area, they hold up Black Lives Matter signs to the drivers passing by in the hopes of getting a reaction. I just roll my eyes at them when I drive by. They try to elicit honks and waves. They seem to crave attention. In my opinion, it somehow makes them feel better about themselves. Perhaps it washes away their white, liberal, boomer guilt. Again, in my opinion, these particular people believe they're making a difference. I assume that none of them are aware that Black Lives Matter, not the concept, but the organization, is a complete fraud. It is not only a corporate and Democrat money laundering operation, but Black leaders of the organization have been exposed for skimming money for their own personal enrichment. Literally, none of the donations have found their way into the Black community, but no one seems to notice or care. Multiple leaders within Black Lives Matter have been exposed for purchasing houses and paying off debt with the donations of sincere contributions to the cause. One Black Lives Matter leader in particular has purchased multiple high-end homes in predominantly white areas. When I say predominantly, I mean neighborhoods that are 98 to 99% white. Not only are these fake activists corrupt, but they are also hypocrites. They won't even live in or own properties in the areas they claim to support and care about. Corruption hidden behind a concept. Are the sign holders at the busy intersection I drive by once a month aware of any of these facts? Maybe they do know and still support the cause. It's possible CNN and MSNBC have convinced them the reports on Black Lives Matter corruption are fake news. I honestly have no idea what goes on in their heads, as most brainwashed people block out what doesn't fit their belief system. As Doge scours government records, discovering how the U.S. federal government spends its money, how it spends U.S. taxpayer money, they are finding massive amounts of corruption and waste. Much of this corruption and waste comes from DEI programs, or should I say, is laundered through DEI programs that are so ridiculous that they're laughable, programs that support trans and LGBTQ plus acceptance in Muslim countries, for example, or fund drag show workshops in South America. But are the programs really being funded? Or is the bulk of the money being diverted right back into the pockets of corrupt American politicians and their financial backers? DEI programs aren't the only place U.S. tax dollars and recklessly printed money are being laundered, as money has been laundered through deep state-created wars for decades, most recently in Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky recently said they haven't received half of what the U.S. government claims to have sent them. On a recent Tucker Carlson podcast, he said half of the weapons the U.S. has sent to Ukraine have been sold to the Mexican cartel. This last claim is incredibly scary and infuriating to me. It is an unforgivable offense when U.S. troops are killed by U.S. weapons, especially if those weapons are resold to the cartel. It's easy to see how and why money is laundered through woke programs when it is a relatable motivation. Greed is simple to understand. When trying to figure out why elites would push these programs and movements to launder money through them, the love of money is something everyone can understand and relate to, at least to a certain extent. When someone robs a bank, we understand they want money and they don't want work for it. But when something completely unrelatable occurs, like someone storing human heads in their freezer, all of a sudden we have no clue what motivates this behavior other than being completely insane or evil. When motivation is pure evil, we have a harder time understanding it. This is one of the reasons so many Americans refused to accept or believe that large numbers of children are trafficked, raped, and killed. They can't relate. They don't want to believe it, so they refuse to accept it. Part of the motivation of pushing DEI on American society is not just corruption, but pure evil. Beyond monetary corruption, it's more difficult but not impossible to understand that woke programs and movements are also created to gain and maintain control. Policies can have multiple goals and purposes, and in the case of woke policies, this is exactly the case. Largely, Democrat Party support only exists today because their followers believe that adherence to woke policies is vital to the existence of mankind, or as the fully indoctrinated might prefer, peoplekind. The belief is if we don't financially contribute to climate change organizations and vastly reduce our carbon footprint, the world will be over in a decade. As such, we must vote for the party that fully understands and supports this belief. What does this one narrative do? It creates a money laundering operation, and it gets people to vote for one political party, in many cases, based off of one policy alone. But it also creates fear, which is the most valuable tool for control. When people are afraid, they will believe almost anything and do almost anything they are told. We have only to go back to COVID to understand this. The Democrat Party is the party of abortion, climate change, DEI, trans, LGBTQ+, and BLM. All of these concepts, policies, and movements were created and are funded and or promoted by the deep state cabal. These movements are used to launder money and maintain control, but they are ultimately used to benefit the ultimate elitist agenda of population control. Woke policies were created and are used to create chaos and pandemonium. They are used to divide and destroy. They are used to create a slave-like mentality and adherence to power. They are used to minimize God while making gods out of the elites. The elites desire to be worshipped. If the elites can create enough chaos, division, and fear, the people will turn from God and erect golden statues in their likeness to worship instead of God. Wokeness is a religion. The elitists who create, fund, and promote woke policies couldn't care less about the people they claim to protect. In fact, these elitists are completely sexist, racist, and homophobic themselves and fully understand that climate change is a hoax. In my opinion, they also understand that abortion is child sacrifice. Here's the part some may have a hard time wrapping their head around. The hidden goal of these woke policies is to make people more sexist, racist, homophobic, more ashamed, and in some cases crazier, divided through hate and controlled through fear and guilt. All by design. The trans push is designed to encourage and amplify mental disorders. DEI is designed to cause hate from the people who lose out on getting a job or a promotion because that job goes to someone who is less qualified but fits the DEI agenda. One of DEI's hidden goals is to convince DEI recipients that they aren't really adequate, that on their own they can't compete, that they need the field to be tilted in their favor. In other words, it's designed to sow hate and doubt. DEI is affirmative action on steroids. Affirmative action went into effect through an executive order by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1965. Johnson may be the most racist president America has ever known, at least in modern times. Do you think he really cared about blacks? No. In my opinion, affirmative action was designed to create hate, doubt, and division. Why was Malcolm X murdered? Because he discovered that the Black Panthers and the KKK were both infiltrated by the FBI. He discovered the Black Panthers and KKK were both being funded by the same people. He became aware that people like Texas oil tycoon H.L. Hunt were funding both sides to create chaos, unrest, and hate during the already turbulent decade of the 1960s. Some may recognize Hunt's name. His family owns the Kansas City Chiefs. According to some, Hunt and Johnson are aware of the true motivations behind the JFK assassination, but that's a story for another day. While the FBI and CIA have their fingerprints all over the civil rights movement, the same can also be said about the feminist movement. Gloria Steinem was an asset of the CIA. She admitted on record to working closely with the CIA and receiving funding from them. After the feminist movement took off, she later denied having any relationship with the CIA. Why would the CIA be involved in the feminist movement? Perhaps in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the CIA was deeply concerned about the plight of women in America. It was hard to write that last sentence with a straight face. The deep state cabal doesn't care about your feelings or your rights. Political correctness and critical race theory were not unleashed on America 30 plus years ago to nurture respect. The concepts were created in pre-Nazi Germany at the Frankfurt School. Their purpose? To infiltrate and destroy an enemy state from within, to weaken and defeat an enemy without firing a shot. The trans movement is by far the cruelest of them all. It originated from the Tavistock Institute in London. Any time you hear something came from the city of London, pay close attention. The movement preys on those with psychological disorders, while many of the other narrative hoaxes can be walked away from with little to no permanent damage being done. This can't be said for many who have been the victim of the trans movement. Some are physically altered and permanently. Some will never function normally again, unable to have children, genitals destroyed, hormones that will never return to normal, outcasts in a two-gender society, no longer fully a man or fully a woman. The end result of the cabal wanting to create chaos, division, hate, and confusion, while keeping a not insignificant number of people from reproducing ever again. And as we've discovered with school shootings, they've also created domestic terrorists out of mentally unstable people. Some people view woke policies, narratives, and agendas as being weird, dumb, bad for society, and bad for the economy. They see them as mistakes made through bad judgment. Some view this wokeness as being a means of stealing and laundering money, just a scam. Others can see how these policies and agendas are intentionally being used to destroy nations and societies. Few have recognized the hidden mechanism in which woke policies and agendas really work to take down great nations. They are designed to make people more racist, more sexist, more homophobic, more suspicious of others, more controlled through fear. They are designed to make a society less inclusive, less united, less connected, less understanding, less forgiving. These policies and agendas are intentionally designed to do the exact opposite of what they claim to do. What is it they say about the deep state cabal? They accuse others of the crimes they're committing themselves. They project onto others their own prejudices, their own hatreds. Right now, certifiably insane people are terrified that they will be rounded up, put into internment camps, and killed. Does the media try to ease their irrational fears? No. Instead, they add fuel to the fire. They create and encourage hysteria. We can't hate the media enough. We can't hate the cabal that controls them enough. DEI intentionally sets people up to fail. What could be more hateful than intentionally putting an unqualified person in a position to fail, to subject them to the ridicule that comes with their failure, to cause intentionally someone to lose faith and confidence in themselves? It's like sending a soldier off to war unprepared and unarmed, or putting a 6-year-old behind the wheel of a car. These people are sick, and Trump is systematically removing their tools of torture, humiliation, and destruction. DEI must DIE, and it is dying. And the exposure of DEI is being used to take down the deep state cabal. The weapons of the deep state, weapons used to control and divide society, are now being used against them, are now being used to destroy them. What poetic justice. And that is Erik Carlson. DEI must DIE. I love it. Don't forget, guys, if you would like to truly detoxify yourself from heavy metals, get the Epic Minerals Zeolite Extra Spray. I'm going to have a little unboxing here. So, bam, take it out. It's wrapped in thermal wrap. And slide that bad boy off. There it is. Epic Minerals Zeolite Extra Spray. This binds to heavy metals and microplastics that are in your system. And it is, oh, this is sealed up. You gotta break the seal. We get these, I'm really bad at this, but it's okay. See, this is the part where I would normally pause the video to make myself look more suave. There we go. Okay, so take the little plastic off, shake, and here we go. 10 sprays. This is the higher concentration, but the new ones have slightly lower concentration so that there isn't any risk of it having that earthy taste that you don't like. So those of you who stopped it because you thought it tasted earthy, give it another try. We have modified the formula to make it taste completely tasteless. As tasteless as most of my jokes. Anyway, don't forget to go to ericc.substack.com. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, do all the things you know you want to. All right, next. From Erik Carlson at ericc.substack.com, Asylum Seekers and Joe Rogan. Completely unrelated rants by Erik Carlson. Elon Musk recently tweeted out something on X that pretty much sums up the emotional manipulation and corruption against the American taxpayer in a nutshell. He said that 80% of asylum seekers living in America have vacationed back in the country from which they are seeking asylum. Are you kidding me? They're seeking asylum in America because their lives and the lives of their family are in danger in the countries they are fleeing. If they didn't leave these countries, they and their family members could have been locked up or worse, killed. Very dramatic, very effective on compassionate and empathetic people. The only problem is it doesn't appear that most of these asylum seekers really had to leave their countries for their safety. When they come to America, they're given opportunities they may not have in their native countries, opportunities to get ahead. But these asylum seekers are offered more than just opportunities. The U.S. government gives them more than they provide for their own citizens, citizens who are very often struggling. Asylum seekers in America receive cash assistance, medical care, job training. They can also receive Social Security income, a green card, housing, childcare, legal assistance, the ability to travel abroad, and they can petition to bring in extended family members. Are you kidding me? They can get all of this simply for telling a lie or exaggerating the truth. Lie about your life being in danger, and you can have all of this. It's truly disgusting. While U.S. taxpayers are paying for these liars to live in America on our dime, American veterans are living on the streets. Families are struggling to stay off the street, and middle-class Americans are barely scraping by. This infuriates me, and it seems to just be a tweet that went completely unnoticed. The assumption I always had was that this is the case, but Musk has backed it with facts, data that he now has access to through Doge. These people should be sent home immediately. I don't care how established they now are in America. If you have traveled on vacation back to the country that you claimed was unsafe for you to be, you need to go. No exceptions. You are a liar and have stolen from the people of America. You have taken food out of the hands of children from poor American families. The 80% that vacation in their native countries is a minimum, meaning more could probably go back to the country they left, but choose not to go. Maybe it's because these countries have nothing to offer a vacationer, or maybe it's because they have already brought all of their extended family members to America to steal from Americans. I don't doubt that there are some legitimate asylum seekers living in America, but it appears the real numbers are vastly lower than the asylum seekers actually living in America, abusing the government system. The fake asylum seekers need to go, and they need to go yesterday. If they have vacationed back in the country they left seeking asylum, this is more than the burden of proof that they aren't really seeking asylum, and they need to go. The Americans who have been discovered through Doge stealing Social Security income need to pay back the money they've stolen as well. No more tolerance. I don't care if you don't have the money. Your real Social Security income should be garnished. I don't know why this particular act of deception and corruption seems to have pushed my buttons, but it has. I suppose it's because they're not only stealing from poor Americans and taking benefits from Americans that need them, it's because these fake asylum seekers are also pretending to be victims in the process. The only thing different from this and claiming a billionaire raped you in a dressing room is the dollar figure of the corruption. I hope to see these families and extended families gathered up soon and put on a plane back to their homelands. I don't care what country they came from. I don't care if they come from Nicaragua, Somalia, or Norway for that matter. If they've traveled back home since seeking asylum, they need to go. It should be easy enough to see who has traveled back to their native countries. There really are no excuses. If they've been voluntarily back, their lives aren't in danger. We have tolerated the corruption for far too long. I just listened to Joe Rogan interview Woody Harrelson on his podcast. It's weird to me how Rogan could so easily ignore the elephant in the room. Woody Harrelson's dad is rumored to have worked for the CIA as an assassin and is thought by some to be involved in the JFK assassination, yet they didn't discuss it on a show known as a conspiracy show. They didn't even discuss the rumor. They didn't try to dispel the rumor. This interview happened at a time the JFK files are still in the news cycle, but nothing, no mention of it. Instead, they talked about how evil Dr. Fauci is and all the evil things he has done, detail after detail. Rogan is very on top of all of the facts. Rogan is an encyclopedia of information on one subject, like Fauci, vaccines, big pharma, but seems to have major gaps on other subjects. I understand we all have gaps in our understanding of certain subjects, but Rogan seems to have Grand Canyon-like gaps. The gaps in Harrelson's understanding of different subjects are akin to Rogan's. Harrelson understands and subscribes to the terrain theory and believes the changes to the medical system brought forth by the Rockefellers are a scam and lead to worse health. He believes wars and epidemics are driven by profit and everything coming from the media is a lie. He has a complete understanding on some subjects like this, but is totally clueless about others. It is impossible to know how much of this ignorance on one subject and wealth of knowledge on another is real. It appears they are attacking the system in regard to one subject, then protecting it on another. Are there certain industries and people the deep state has determined will take one for the team? Have they been given up as a sacrifice to the others to appease the masses? It feels as if the healthcare system is an industry that has been chosen to take one for the team. Maybe it's because the majority of Americans no longer trust it. On the podcast, Rogan talked about how psychedelics have been repressed by the US government because they are so beneficial. They are beneficial to the brains of PTSD victims, and in general, they are beneficial to all people in better understanding the world around them. I'm actually not arguing his statements on this. I have no idea if they're beneficial. I know that they have fried people's brains, but I'm not arguing they can't be used to better some people's situations. My problem is with what he said about the government repressing the use of them. Rogan claimed when hippies started experimenting with psychedelics in the 1960s, the government squashed it as they did the civil rights movement. Seriously, is he really this naive? Or is he intentionally leading the public astray? I honestly don't know. No one can know for sure if someone is simply ignorant or is intentionally misleading you. And the fact is that the CIA provided LSD for the hippies, as in all the LSD came from the CIA. The CIA literally bought up the world's supply of LSD decades earlier when they started their MK Ultra experiments on people. The hippie movement was a giant CIA mind control experiment. They took the MK Ultra laboratory experiments to the streets to discover how psychedelics could be used to manipulate and control the minds of the masses. Not only was the hippie movement and the whole decade of the 1960s a CIA psyop, but they used the counterculture movement to protect their Vietnam War. The dirty, smelly, drug-addicted hippies opposed the war, while middle-class Americans sitting at home watching on TV believed if the hippies opposed the war, then the war must be good. The counterculture movement was created to do the opposite of what they appeared to be doing. The counterculture wasn't created to stop the war, but to justify it. Kind of like how DEI was really created to make people more racist, sexist, and homophobic. Both were designed to create division. How can Rogan be so off on this? How can he have an understanding that is 180 degrees from the truth on this matter? He believes wars are created to push drugs, but somehow the same government is suppressing the use of them. Why does he seem to have such gaps in his understanding of some topics, even within the same subject? Maybe he is just well educated on some matters and completely ignorant on others. It just seems that he is attacking the subject matters and people who have already been predetermined to be thrown to the wolves, thrown under the bus, but seems to be protecting the subject matters and people who have not, at least this time. It would be one thing if he just spewed out nonsense about the government, CIA, suppressing the psychedelic hippie movement of the 1960s. But how is it possible that he could also completely forget to ask Woody Harrelson about the rumors of his dad working for the CIA and his rumored involvement in the JFK assassination? Some say Rogan risked so much by standing up to the vaccines, Big Pharma, and the media a few years back. Did he? His podcast is bigger than ever. I'm not saying Rogan's podcast hasn't been used to wake some people up, and it was probably valuable in getting Trump reelected, but I just can't shake the feeling that he is working both sides. Did he support Trump because it was inevitable that Trump was going to win? Did Trump and Rogan work together, or did Trump use Rogan knowing that Rogan isn't actually loyal? I don't know. Everything is such a psyop, it is impossible to know for sure. But my pendulum of trust for Rogan has swung back from somewhat trusting him during the election to watching him from the corner of my eye again. It's been like this for me the past 6 to 7 years. Oh, I almost forgot. Both Rogan and Harrelson said Jimmy Carter is the greatest president of their lifetimes. This, while Trump is systematically dismantling the deep state. How are we to even take these two seriously? I will say this. Jimmy Carter almost certainly got taken down by the deep state, as did Nixon. And of course, let's face it, same with JFK, they murdered him. I'll say about Joe Rogan, you don't need to wonder whether or not he works for the bad guys. He definitely does. All you need to do is watch his early positions on vaccines and then watch what he said sometime close to March 11th, 2020, about how anti-vaxxers are the wackiest, craziest people. They ought to lose their kids. That's the moment when saying that to millions and millions of people would do the most damage, would cause the most people to take the vaccines. And it wasn't until all the people who were going to take the vaccine had already taken it that they allowed old Joe to come out and start talking about ivermectin, which, by the way, is not health food as far as I'm concerned. I'm still ambivalent about ivermectin. Lee Merritt's a big proponent. I'm not there yet. I'm not going to be popping ivermectin for fun, like it's a supplement. But yeah, Joe Rogan is a twisted mofo. All right, next. Hey, castor blend, guys. Want your wrinkles to disappear? Get the rose geranium castor blend, or get the core essential oil castor blend, which has tea tree oil in it. Rub it into your skin. Exfoliation takes place. And nothing penetrates the skin like castor oil. There's a magical property to the stuff. And then the sea buckthorn fruit oil, all you need is a little bit. All right, let's go. Oh, tulipblooms.shop. Try castor oil. Try castorblend.com and give me some feedback. From ericc.substack.com. Ukraine Minerals Deal, The Art of the Deal by Erik Carlson. Does anyone remember the Seinfeld episode where Jerry and George are trying to come up with an idea for a TV pilot to pitch to NBC? George came up with the idea of a man being sentenced to being Jerry's butler because of a car accident and not having insurance and the ability to pay him back. I thought of this when I first heard Trump was trying to make a minerals deal with Zelensky. I can easily picture in my mind Zelensky as Trump's butler. Some of you are probably thinking, no more money to Ukraine. I understand your disdain and desire to completely wash our hands of Ukraine altogether. Money being sent to Ukraine for aid in their war has been a money laundering operation that has resulted in the death of millions of Ukrainians and Russians while lining the pockets of corrupt elites, all on the dime of U.S. taxpayers. I don't see this deal the same way. I see it as Trump getting America paid back for the money sent to Ukraine. The Biden administration would have you believe the U.S. has sent around $174 billion in aid, but Trump is asking for $500 billion from Ukraine through critical raw materials. Trump obviously believes the U.S. has sent Ukraine much more than the Biden administration claims. The $500 billion recovered from Ukraine would take a long time to recoup at current production rates, but remember that Ukraine has been at war with Russia for the past 3 years. If Trump brokered an end to the war, production could ramp up very quickly, and we know how persistent Trump can be in getting things done more quickly. Just ask Elon Musk. Trump recently told him he's not gutting the government fast enough. Trump also feels illegals aren't being deported fast enough. The art of the deal. Donald Trump is a businessman. As a businessman, he likes to hold leverage in any deal. He never wants to be dependent on anyone or anything. To make a good deal, you have to be able to walk away from that deal. In order to walk away from the deal, you got to have options. China currently controls about 2/3 to 3/4 of the rare earth deposits in the world. China processes more on the high end of that figure, 3/4. Critical raw materials are vital for modern technology. In fact, 98% of gallium comes from China. Gallium is essential for the production of semiconductors. In recent times, China has actually banned the export of some critical raw materials to the U.S., making it impossible to produce some technology domestically. Trump is looking to make America more independent. Dependency on other countries was exposed as a major weakness with the closing of the borders during the COVID lockdowns. Americans no longer had access to many vitally important medicines and technologies. Trump wants to onshore essential production, and to do this, the country needs critical raw materials. The U.S. can produce some of the material needed, but that process needs to ramp up very quickly, and the process probably can't happen quickly enough to avoid a shortfall. To make matters worse, there are some materials that the U.S. will still need to rely on other countries to produce, but they can't rely on one country for anything if they can help it. Currently, the U.S. imports 100% of its graphite, 76% of its cobalt, and 50% of its lithium. Its nickel is processed in Canada. Half of the world's lithium is found in Australia. Trump recently met with leaders of Australia to discuss trade tariffs. Where does Ukraine come in? Ukraine has 5% of the world's critical raw materials, 19 million tons of graphite, top 5 in the world. Graphite is needed in the production of electric vehicle batteries. Ukraine also has deposits of lithium, also needed for EVs, and titanium needed to make airplanes. I mentioned EV batteries, but lithium batteries in general are needed to store energy. After the Ukraine war is over, it will need to be rebuilt. I believe the U.S. will play a big part in that rebuilding. After the war, Ukraine will be able to ramp up production again. I believe Trump will play a big part in making that happen as well. Trump's deal with Ukraine and other countries not only opens the door to more onshoring of production in America, which makes America safer and creates more jobs, but it gives Trump leverage in making deals with other countries. Trump is in the middle of negotiating trade deals with countries like Mexico, Canada, and China. In order to get the best deals, the U.S. has to have some kind of leverage. It can't completely rely on other countries as it currently does. Trump needs to have the ability to walk away. Otherwise, he won't get the deals he's looking for. If one country is unwilling to accept his terms, he will make it up through domestic production and trading with other countries. No longer will America be walked on. No longer will America have to accept the terms of a deal without any recourse. This is the art of the deal. The ability to walk away from a deal is what makes the deal a good one. The domestic production of medicine and semiconductors, as well as the increased domestic production of critical raw materials, will go a long way towards the U.S. having the upper hand again. Not the upper hand to exploit other countries, but the upper hand to require fair deals to be made. And that is the latest. I don't know if it's the latest, but it's close. The DEI piece was the latest. Oh, I had him open twice. What I'm going to do now, guys, is ask ChatGPT what happens, how can the U.S. get gallium without relying on China? How can the USA get gallium without relying on China? Let's find out. Hold for processing. I'll read it out. Although ChatGPT has been running really slow, it might be that I need a new computer. But it should be able to crank this out faster than I can read it, right? All right. The United States can reduce or eliminate its reliance on China for gallium through several key strategies. 1. Domestic production from bauxite and zinc processing. Gallium is primarily obtained as a byproduct of bauxite, aluminum ore refining, and zinc processing. The U.S. has bauxite reserves and zinc mining operations which could be leveraged to produce gallium domestically. However, currently, no primary gallium is produced in the U.S. because it has been cheaper to import from China. Alcoa and Century Aluminum operate bauxite refineries and could be encouraged to extract gallium during aluminum production. Tech Resources, a zinc producer, could recover gallium from its operations if economically viable. Government incentives, subsidies, or regulations could make domestic extraction financially competitive. 2. Strengthening supply chains with allied countries. The U.S. can source gallium from nations that are not geopolitical adversaries. Australia, one of the world's largest bauxite producers with untapped gallium potential. Canada has zinc and aluminum refining infrastructure that could be adapted for gallium recovery. Germany and Japan, Kazakhstan and Ukraine, South Korea. You know what? I don't know what to say. Now, there's also gallium alternatives in technology. While gallium is critical for GaN, gallium nitride, semiconductors, and GaAs, gallium arsenide chips, research into alternatives could reduce dependence. Silicon carbide for power electronics, indium phosphide for some optoelectronic applications, R&D into new semiconductor materials that can replace gallium where feasible. Okay, doesn't sound so bad, right? Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. As of the recording of this, XRP is at 252, Bitcoin is at 88.8. The massive sell-off in crypto took place because Trump told China 10% more. Let's read some Vox Day. He gets into the trade war stuff, and I want to get into it also. And I'll just do Clown World abandons Taiwan first. From voxday.net, Clown World abandons Taiwan. The Taiwan fixation is a long and meandering article in Foreign Affairs that serves to obscure the primary point being made there, but the inescapable conclusion eventually reached by the intrepid reader who manages to slash and burn his way through the jungle-like maze of text is that Clown World's strategists now accept that the U.S. military is no longer capable of winning a war with China, which is good, because it isn't. And here's from the article. The fate of Taiwan keeps American policymakers up at night, and it should. A Chinese invasion of the island would confront the United States with one of the gravest foreign policy choices ever, letting Taiwan fall to Beijing would dent Washington's credibility and create new challenges for U.S. military forces in Asia. But the benefits of keeping Taiwan free, keeping it clown, would have to be weighed against the costs of waging the first armed conflict between great powers since 1945. Even if the United States prevailed, and it might well lose, an outright war with China would likely kill more Americans and destroy more wealth than any conflict since the Vietnam War and perhaps since World War II. Nuclear and cyber weapons could make it worse, bringing destruction to the U.S. homeland. These would be catastrophic consequences for the United States. As terrible as a U.S.-Chinese war would be, an American president would face immense pressure to fight for Taipei, pressure from clown world. Many U.S. policymakers are convinced that Taiwan, a prosperous democracy in a vital region, is worth protecting despite the daunting price of doing so. Political calculations may also push a U.S. president into war by staying out. The president could expect to be blamed not only for permitting the economic meltdown that China's invasion would trigger, but also for losing Taiwan after a decades-long battle of wills between Washington and Beijing over the island's future. That would doom a president's legacy. Against such a certainty, any chance of salvaging the situation could look like a better bet, and by opting to fight China to protect Taiwan, the president would preserve the possibility of going down in history as a great wartime victor. In the 1960s, President Lyndon Johnson faced a choice between ramping up a U.S. military campaign in Vietnam and allowing the communists to take over the country. He doubted that a war was necessary or winnable, but he sent American soldiers all the same. U.S. leaders need a way to escape the ghastly decision to either wage World War III or watch Taiwan go down. They need a third option. Washington must make a plan that enables Taiwan to mount a viable self-defense, allows the United States to assist from a distance, and keeps the U.S. position in Asia intact, regardless of how a cross-strait conflict concludes. This way, the United States could abstain from sending its military forces to defend Taiwan if China invades the island and does not attack U.S. bases or warships. Before the moment of crisis arrives, political leaders should initiate a frank national dialogue about U.S. interests in the Western Pacific. Americans must know the true costs of conflict with China, the deaths of tens and perhaps hundreds of thousands of U.S. soldiers, the possibility that nuclear weapons would be fired in desperation, an economic downturn dwarfing that of the Great Recession of 2008, and severe disruption of everyday life. It will take great effort for policymakers to communicate the scale of the potential devastation, because a war with China would look nothing like the relatively small and contained wars that the United States has waged in recent decades. In addition to making clear the costs of war with China, U.S. officials should stress the need to coexist with China as prominently as they discuss the need to compete with it. In the coming years, especially if Beijing's behavior improves, American policymakers should adopt competitive coexistence as an approach for U.S. relations with China. In doing so, they would convey Washington's willingness to establish stable patterns of interaction, limit security competition, and address global problems collaboratively. At a minimum, political leaders should avoid undue alarmism about Taiwan. The Biden administration was right to tamp down public speculation about the year by which China might intend to launch an invasion. The Trump administration should go further to discourage catastrophic thinking, including by communicating to the public that China would not pose an immeasurably greater challenge to the United States if Taiwan came under its control. End quote. I don't know why the neocons are preemptively aligning themselves with reality in the case of China when they aggressively refused to do so in the case of Russia. Perhaps they simply don't hate the Chinese with the same irrational hatred they harbor for the Russians. Perhaps the extent of the Chinese industrial advantage is simply too great for even the most magical thinkers to believe they can simply wish away, or more likely they want to reserve the limited U.S. military resources that will be available for any foreign adventures for the Middle East. The trade war with China should provide sufficient excitement to keep even the most inveterate drama seekers occupied. There is simply no benefit to the United States of engaging in an actual war in the South Pacific. Next, from boxday.net, 20% tariffs on China. The God Emperor 2.0 knows perfectly well that trade wars are winnable in some circumstances, and that those circumstances apply to the USA vis-a-vis China, as well as a number of other Asian and European countries, as indicated by his most recent executive order. From the executive order from Federal Register? No, whitehouse.gov. Section 1, background. With Executive Order 14195 of February 1st, 2025, imposing duties to address the synthetic opioid supply chain in the People's Republic of China, I determined that the failure of the government of the People's Republic of China, PRC, to act to blunt the sustained influx of synthetic opioids, including fentanyl, flowing from the PRC to the United States constituted an unusual and extraordinary threat, which has its source in substantial part outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. To address that threat, I invoked my authority under Section 1702A1B of IEEPA to impose ad valorem tariffs on articles that are products of the PRC as defined by the Federal Register notice described in Section 2D of Executive Order 14195 as amended by Executive Order 14200 of February 5th, 2025, amendment to duties addressing the synthetic opioid supply chain in the People's Republic of China. Pursuant to Section 3 of Executive Order 14195, I have determined that the PRC has not taken adequate steps to alleviate the illicit drug crisis through cooperative enforcement actions, and that the crisis described in Executive Order 14195 has not abated. Section 2, Amendment. In recognition of the fact that the PRC has not taken adequate steps to alleviate the illicit drug crisis, Section 2A of Executive Order 14195 is hereby amended by striking the words 10% and inserting in lieu thereof the words 20%. End quote. Although China's foreign ministry is clinging to its Ricardian rhetoric, I don't even know what he means by that, the fact that they're not escalating tends to indicate that they understand that, at least with regards to this particular trade issue, the US president holds all the cards. The New York Times asks a question. The United States has imposed further 10% tariffs on most goods from China. What is your reaction? And Lin Jian responds, I believe you've noticed the statements released by competent Chinese departments. The fentanyl issue is a flimsy excuse to raise U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports. China has made clear its opposition more than once. Our countermeasures to defend our rights and interests are fully legitimate and necessary. The U.S., not anyone else, is responsible for the fentanyl crisis inside the U.S. In the spirit of humanity and goodwill towards the American people, we have taken robust steps to assist the U.S. in dealing with the issue. This is obvious to all, and people from various sectors in the U.S. have expressed thanks to China on multiple occasions. Instead of recognizing our efforts, the U.S. has sought to smear and shift the blame to China and is seeking to pressure and blackmail China with tariff hikes. They've been punishing us for helping them. This is not going to solve the U.S.'s problem and will undermine our counter-narcotics dialogue and cooperation. Let me reiterate that intimidation does not scare us. Bullying does not work on us. Pressuring, coercion, or threats are not the right way of dealing with China. Anyone using maximum pressure on China is picking the wrong guy and miscalculating. If the U.S. truly wants to solve the fentanyl issue, then the right thing to do is consult with China on the basis of equality, mutual respect, and mutual benefit to address each other's concerns. If the U.S. has other agendas in mind, and if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight until the end. We urge the U.S. to stop being domineering and return to the right track of dialogue and cooperation at an early date. Below is the list. And so he's done. Below is the list of the 10 countries whose positions are weakest concerning a potential trade war with the USA. China, number one at $279 billion. That's the trade deficit we have with China. Mexico, 152. So it's not even a close second. Vietnam, 104 billion. Vietnam. Are you freaking kidding me? What is Vietnam's GDP? What is... Let's find out. Because I didn't know that Vietnam had the third. We have the third biggest trade deficit with Vietnam. Unfreaking real. That is difficult to believe. Wowzers. Seriously. All righty. Page non-responsive. This must be my computer. Oh my God. Our trade deficit with Vietnam is a quarter of their GDP. Dude, we own Vietnam, and Vietnam borders China. That's remarkable. All right, I think I'm going to wrap up because there's other stuff I have to get to. So, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to go to Erik Carlson's Substack, ericc.substack.com. Go to Badlands Media, badlands.substack.com. Get the best skincare in the world. Everything completely natural, made right here on site from scratch. Go to tulipblooms.shop. Detoxify from heavy metals. That's right. Zeolite Extra Spray at epicminerals.net. Promo code Shapiro. Check it all out, my dear friends. And that's our show. Let us pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you tomorrow.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.